Hey everybody, welcome into the back room. I'm Andy Ostroy.
I do think there have to be consequences for abject war crimes. If you're doing something that is just completely unlawful and ruthless, then there is a consequence for that. That's why the military said it won't follow unlawful orders from their commander-in-chief. There's a standard, there's an ethos, there's a belief that we are above what so many things that our enemies or others would do.
Jeez Louise, I'm getting so fed up with these Democrats yammering about, don't follow unlawful orders.
No, Andy, that's Pete Hegseth from 2016.
What?
I know.
That was Pete Hegseth?
I know. Who would have thought that he was reasonable?
But are you talking about the same Pete Hegseth who is so upset with the 6 Democrats who made that video saying the exact same thing that he just said there from 2016? That Pete Hegseth?
Ding, ding, ding.
Oh my God. All right, we're going to talk about all that and more. And we also have Ruth Ben-Ghiat back with us today. But first, thanks for tuning in. We appreciate you listening, and we'd love to hear your comments. So email us at backroomandy@gmail.com and or post on our social media, and we'll read some feedback next time. And if you like the podcast, please rate and review and follow or subscribe, and you'll be notified every time we post a new episode. All right, that was Pete Hegseth in 2016. So what changed, Pete? What changed? This SecDef, this Department of Defense, this administration is embroiled in a freaking shitstorm right now of epic proportions over this so-called double tap strike following the bombing of a boat in the Caribbean with suspected drug traffickers. The boat exploded. It was split into pieces, and apparently there were 2 dudes hanging on for their dear lives. And the reporting is that Hegseth says something like, kill them all, issued this double tap strike order, which many believe is a war crime and murder. And, of course, the administration is denying it. He's denying it. Congress people were briefed yesterday by the military. We'll get to that in a second. But I don't know. I mean, I watched this thing unfolding, and part of me feels like his days are numbered, Hegseth. And then there's another part of me that's like, no, they're not.
Well, he's straight out of Central Casting, and Trump just loves him.
He does have good hair.
So it would be hard to imagine, Andy, that you're going to get a core group of Republicans who are not digging him.
Well, Trump has issued a statement unequivocally supporting Pete Hegseth, which doesn't necessarily mean anything. Trump can do that on a Monday, and on a Tuesday you can fire somebody. But what was interesting about this briefing yesterday is that it was done by Admiral Frank Bradley, who apparently, according to Hegseth, he gave the order. It wasn't Hegseth, it was him, because Hegseth had left. And also, Chairman of the Joint Chiefs, Dan Raising Cane. So they went to Washington yesterday. They met with a bunch of Congress people from both sides of the aisle. So we got a few clips. This is Senator Tom Cotton of Arkansas, followed by Congressman Jim Himes of Connecticut.
I saw 2 survivors trying to flip a boat loaded with drugs down for the United States, back over so they could stay in the fight. And potentially, given all the contacts we heard of other narco-terrorist boats in the area coming to their aid to recover their cargo and recover those narco-terrorists. And just like you would blow up a boat off of the Somali coast or the Yemeni coast, and you'd come back and strike it again if it still had terrorists and it still had explosives or missiles, Admiral Bradley and Secretary Hegseth did exactly what we would expect them to do.
What I saw in that room was one of the most troubling things I've seen in my time in public service. You have 2 individuals in clear distress, without any means of locomotion, with a destroyed vessel, who were killed by the United States. Under the DoD manual for abiding by the laws of armed conflict, the specific example given of an impermissible action is attacking a shipwreck. Any American who sees the video that I saw will see the United States military attacking shipwrecked sailors. People will someday see this video and they will see that That video shows, if you don't have the broader context, an attack on shipwrecked sailors.
To me, the question is, what video were these two guys watching, right? Like, they were shown a video, and it's like they watched two different films, right? Now, we know that the administration is claiming that the second strike was necessary because these two shipwrecked survivors posed a grave threat to America and to Americans. They use the term self-defense. I want to know how two guys floating in the water trying to stay alive, and apparently they're repeatedly going underwater. Like, they go underwater, then they come back up for air because they're exhausted and they're just trying literally to stay alive. And I'm not going to deny that they were drug traffickers, because let's say they were. We could say they were, even though we're not sure, because the Department of Defense has never shown any proof, any evidence to Congress or anybody else, despite all the claims they make. But let's give them the benefit of the doubt. Even if these guys were the worst, vile drug traffickers, there were still two guys bobbing up and down, trying not to drown, right? Can someone explain to me how they needed to die in self-defense? Self-defense usually means someone's aggressively, violently threatening your life, either with their physical body or a weapon. How is self-defense anything but a ridiculous, asinine statement?
We don't have to actually see the video, although I'd like to know that Tom Cotton was completely lying. The notion that these two guys are going to flip a piece of a boat over and then have it be motorized. When we did see the first video, this boat was severely damaged to the point of barely floating. On top of that, the real problem here is the dubious legal assertion that the U.S. is justified in any wartime authority against a criminal problem. We don't have police officers going in the street and then shooting drug dealers. They just don't. They don't. I mean, yeah, if they're armed and they're facing a criminal with a gun, of course. But if they're just, basically, if they're selling fentanyl on the street, which is a terrible scourge, we don't shoot them.
I say this all the time. You're exactly right. Like, we could literally watch someone shoot a baby in the head. That still doesn't give us the right to go be judge and jury and executioner, right? You arrest them, you prosecute them, you convince a jury that they're guilty, and then hopefully they go to prison. Or in the case of like an O.J. Simpson, even though the evidence was abundant, they walk, right? So none of it makes any sense.
That's why we have a Coast
Trump always goes like, yeah, these are bad people. Okay. That's why we have cops. That's why we have laws. That's why we have courts. That's why we have prisons. So there's nothing they're saying. Nothing. Zero. Absolutely nothing that seems to justify this thing. But you also said something, Maddie, which is very, very important. That is, just show us the fucking video. Right? The Democrats are saying, show the public the video.
And Rand Paul.
And Rand Paul, who does not have good hair. Worst hair in Congress. But why not? Just show the video. If you truly believe that the video shows that they were like carrying cannons on their back and were about to blow up Texas, show us the video. But we're never going to see that video. I don't think we're ever going to see that video. And then it's just going to be this back and forth of like, no, it wasn't. It was justified. No, it wasn't justified.
I mean, every single boat that they have blown up has been unjustified.
Yeah, well, here's the other thing, too. It's like if you have all the evidence that it's Tren de Aragua or MS-13 or whatever, how come you've not gone to Congress? Why don't you just go, here's the evidence. This is who they are. Here are the photos. Here's the prison records. Here's the intel that we've got. Whatever. Are we okay to bomb? Thank you, Congress. Like, why not just do that? Right? So we don't know who they're killing. And so without that, it just looks like they're randomly murdering people. Let's play this other clip from Himes.
I don't want to get specific here, but there was no radio. There were two individuals clinging to flotsam. That's what there was. There wasn't weaponry of any kind. There wasn't a radio. There was no means for them to communicate other than the fact that the fire and the smoke was fairly well visible for a long distance around, but there was no radio.
Show us the video. show us the video. I want to see something other than two men clinging for their life to a boat. The other thing that's really fascinating is that the example of a war crime not to commit in the actual military training manual is shipwrecked survivors. So they're literally saying, hey, in the future, if you want to murder two guys hanging on by a piece of a boat after they survived an attack, don't do that, because right here, that says war crime. That specifically, do not do that. And then Hegseth, who's been playing defense for the last several days, somebody tweeted, some dude named Andrew. He said, with every attack on Hegseth, I want to see another boat blown up and sent to the bottom of the ocean. Well, this is just some random dude on the internet, which Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth responded to.
Oh my God.
Of course he did.
With, quote, this is a direct quote, "Your wish is our command, Andrew. Just sunk another narco boat." Could you imagine Donald Rumsfeld doing that? Could you imagine Leon Panetta doing that?
Don't make us defend Donald Rumsfeld in this
Could you
room.
imagine James Mattis doing that? This guy is a fucking clown. He's a clown. Cosplaying G.I. Joe. Let's play this clip of Hegseth first basically bragging for the whole thing.
I can tell you that was definitely not artificial intelligence. I watched it live. We knew exactly who was in that boat. We knew exactly what they were doing, and we knew exactly who they represented. And that was Tren de Aragua, a narco-terrorist organization designated by the United States, trying to poison our country with illicit drugs.
And then he might have gotten a memo of like, dude, you might find yourself in The Hague in a few years. You might want to change that. And so then we have this Pete Hegseth.
I watched that first strike live. As you can imagine, at the Department of War, we got a lot of things to do. So I didn't stick around for the hour and 2 hours, whatever, where all the sensitive site exploitation digitally occurs. So I moved on to my next meeting. A couple of hours later, I learned that that commander had made which he had the complete authority to do. And by the way, Admiral Bradley made the correct decision to ultimately sink the boat and eliminate the threat. He sunk the boat, and eliminated the threat. And it was the right call. We have his back, and the American people are safer because narco-terrorists know you can't bring drugs through the water and eventually on land if necessary to the American people. We will eliminate that threat, and we're proud to do it.
So you didn't see any survivors, to be clear, after that first trip? You personally?
I did not personally see survivors, but I stand, because the thing was on fire. It was exploded in fire or smoke. You can't see anything. You got digital. This is called the fog of war.
This boat
is on fire.
You know, I stuck around at the beginning, but then I had more important things to do, like I had to go to Walmart and pick up some stuff.
Would have did a bottle of stuff.
I mean, we're just bombing a boat. Like, why do I have to be there the whole time? I'm a busy man. What bullshit that was. Here's the other thing, too. We're not at war with Venezuela. We're not at war.
Yet?
Well, maybe we will be. But we're not at war. So it's probably not a war crime. It's murder. It's really what it is. It's murder. You know, I didn't go to John Jay School of Criminal Justice, but I know that if you just see somebody flailing in the water and you blow them up, that's murder. There are rules of engagement that we must follow. We don't blow people up. We don't kill people. We don't murder them because we don't want it to happen to our soldiers. We don't want it to happen to our citizens when they're abroad. We are the moral center for this shit in the world. We obey the laws, even when a lot of people wouldn't want us to, when they want us to act like vigilantes. We don't do that because we have soldiers all over the world, and we don't want them getting picked off in the same way we have been indiscriminately shooting people and killing people. This is why we don't do this shit, because we don't want it happening to us. And because it's just cruel and inhumane. I mean, that goes without saying. The other thing, too, that's important to point out is the fentanyl, the fentanyl, the fentanyl. Guess where there's no fentanyl? Venezuela. There's no fucking fentanyl in Venezuela. Where does it come from? Mexico. What comes from Venezuela and Colombia?
Cocaine.
Cocaine, mama. I just went into Pacino.
Yeah, well, it's easy to slide right
Say
there.
hello to my little friend. No, there's no fentanyl. So it's like, that is justification number one for this whole thing. There's an influx of it. It's killing, as the administration likes to say, the fentanyl's killing like 300 million Americans.
2 days ago,
Yeah, was
it was 300,000 that we saved by blowing up these boats, apparently.
So that's a crock of shit. So the whole point is, so then it's like, the drug traffickers. He says this as he pardons Cocaine Juan Hernandez, the former president of Honduras, who was sitting in a U.S. prison after being convicted of drug trafficking. This is a guy who said, I've been shoving up so much cocaine up the noses of Americans. At the same time you're blowing up fishermen or drug traffickers in the Caribbean and the Pacific, you're pardoning this dude. Somebody want to explain that to me?
Apparently, he didn't know what he was doing, because when he was asked, he's like, I don't know who that is.
Again.
No, but I love it. This. I try to find like the one thing I could look at Trump and like maybe chuckle at and like be humored by whenever he does shit. So he did the classic thing. He was like, I don't know who he is, but he got a raw deal. How do you know he had a raw deal if you don't know who he is? Then the IG report came out that Hegseth, with his sharing of sensitive war plans over Signalgate, they said him doing all this breached protocols, communication protocols, it was classified information, blah, 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 blah. Quote, it created a risk to operational security that could have resulted in failed U.S. mission objectives and potential harm to U.S. pilots. That's pretty grave, isn't it? And what was SecDef Pete's response?
Fully exonerated.
Total exoneration. Case closed.
Yeah.
They must really, truly, and of course I know they do, but I'm just going to say it for effect. They must truly think their base is so stupid. They must think the media is so stupid. They must think we're all so stupid.
In regards to their base, I don't think they're wrong.
Well, they're getting less and less correct. You almost killed people. Total exoneration. Like, it is a joke. But the real question is it in a sense going to be total exoneration? Is it going to be case closed? Is Congress just going to put their micro peens between their legs, the Republicans?
Yes.
And just carry the water?
Yes.
I mean, if you had to guess, yes.
All right, well, here's the thing that keeps Optimistic Andy optimistic. Hegseth and Trump, we know they're never going to change. They're just never going to change. So a month from now, something else is going to come out because there are amazing reporters. And this is another really important fact. You can kick out the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Wall Street Journal. You can kick all these people out of the Department of Defense press room and bring in all your wackadoodle, sycophantic, right-wing, Trump-loving reporters. You could do all that. Guess what? Doesn't change a thing. Look at all the amazing reporting we've been getting in the last couple of weeks. And that's not going to stop. So they are going to continue to be totally reckless and corrupt and chaotic. At the same time, we truly do have an amazing independent media. And so it's only going to get worse. So if somehow Hegseth survives this, there's another one around the corner that he is likely not going to survive.
It's very possible. But ultimately, when prices keep going up and people are not able to have the kind of jobs that they want and healthcare prices are going to go through the roof, like, you know, obviously the topic today is super important. And I really, really hope that at some point he'll be held accountable, or anyone in his administration will be held accountable. But, you know, at some point there's a breaking point for how much people can just pay for things.
Sure.
And,
Well,
and then maybe this is like the icing on the cake.
Well, things aren't mutually exclusive. There's chaos organizationally and operationally at the same time. Inflation is rising, and people are getting very frustrated about what they have to pay for all the things in their lives. But that's why we saw the results of the election last month the way we did. That's why we saw the margins continue to shrink. You know, Afton Bain just, came within 9 points in Tennessee. She lost, but she cut the margin from 22 points, which is what Trump won by in that district last year, to 9. And that's been happening. We had people from Florida last year, this year, who ran back in the spring in special elections. They cut the margins. It's been happening all over. Every single special election has been a disaster for Republicans in one way or another, either by a significant reduction in the margin or in a defeat. And so we're seeing the independents have totally defected from Trump. Hispanics have defected. Young people have defected. His approval is the lowest it's ever been. The latest poll came out at 36%. So I think we're seeing that, Jen. I think,
Good.
And I think we're going to continue, and I think it's just going to get worse and worse, and he's just likely to get more panicked, more desperate, and do bad shit, like Maddie said, invade Venezuela, which would be the worst thing he could possibly do, because that's the last thing that you want to hear about when you're standing online at Walmart trying to buy something you can't afford because it's too expensive.
Yeah, he'll probably just keep bombing them as opposed to actually put people on the ground, but we'll see what happens. It seems almost inevitable at this point.
Yeah. And the $64 billion question is, what is Marjorie Taylor Greene going to be doing from this point forward? How is she going to be reminding MAGA of all the things that they were promised and are not getting? I don't see her slinking away and going back to the gym in Georgia. You know what I mean? She's got way too much political capital, and I think she's got something up her sleeve. Higher office and some kind of bigger role in MAGA, as she's very calculatingly watching the movement break. All right, let's get to the winners and losers.
My winner, Senator Mark Kelly, for contrasting his lifetime of service to Trump's record and condemning the administration's abuse of power. My loser, SCOTUS, who cleared the way for Texas lawmakers to use newly redrawn congressional maps favoring Republicans in the 2026 midterm elections.
My winner is Costco for suing the Trump administration to protect their right to refund for tariffs paid on imported goods and arguing that the levies are unlawful and challenging the president's authority to impose them. My loser is SCOTUS. The right-wing majority has given every state the green light to hold an unlawful election simply by gerrymandering any time the court deems is on the eve of an election, when the eve is in the eye of this completely partisan majority.
My loser, Pete Hegseth. Surprise, surprise. My winner, the New York Times, which has filed suit against the Defense Department over First Amendment rights and the restrictions placed on journalists. And that gets us to the weekly rant. So now that we are into December, I thought I'd take a moment and highlight Donald Trump's disastrous November. And man, what a bigly shitty month that was. Early in the month, he was delivered a devastating blow at the voting booth in a massive referendum on everything he stands for. And did he learn from that? Fuck no. He decided it'd be wise to angrily declare, quote, I don't want to hear about the affordability. And that, quote, affordability is a Democrat scam. He was dealt a humiliating blow in Congress with the virtual unanimous bipartisan vote to pass the Epstein Law. He was the subject of many of the 20,000 plus shocking and potentially incriminating Epstein emails released by the House Oversight Committee. He watched as an overwhelming majority of Americans blamed him and his party for the 43-day government shutdown. He was dealt major losses in the federal courts in a variety of cases, including his immigration policies, troop deployments, and indictments of political opponents. He and Hegseth have been accused of murder and war crimes over the double-tap strike on an alleged narco-terrorist drug trafficking boat in which 2 shipwrecked survivors were killed. He had a National Guard member stationed in D.C. assassinated on his watch, and another one shot and in critical condition. He saw the MAGA fever finally beginning to break on some level, most notably with the very public, very nasty feud with Marjorie Taylor Greene. He further enraged MAGAs by practically blowing New York City Mayor-elect Zohran Mamdani during their Oval Office meeting. He watched his approval sink to the lowest ever at 36%. His anger and frustration bubbled up, resulting in a series of disgusting personal attacks, calling female reporters stupid and pigs, and calling Minnesota Governor Tim Walz seriously retarded. He went in for an MRI, but told reporters he has no idea what for further fueling rumors of seriously failing mental and physical health. Who goes in for an MRI and doesn't know why? He's a really lousy pathological liar. What is he hiding? And lastly, though he continues to call the former president Sleepy Joe Biden, he can't seem to keep his fucking eyes open at any meeting. He does not look or sound healthy. He appears tired, weak, and more mentally deranged than ever. And for the first time in 10 years, Trump can't control his own narrative. He can't control the news cycle. He does appear like a wounded animal. He's desperate, flailing. He's been playing nonstop defense, which is when his worst, most self-destructive instincts and decisions materialize. What Donald Trump experienced in just that 1 month was more humiliation and defeat than most presidents have in an entire term. One can only imagine what his December will be like. All right, let's get to Ruth Ben-Ghiat. She is a professor of history at New York University. She writes about fascism, authoritarianism, and propaganda. She is the recipient of Guggenheim and other fellowships. She's an advisor to Protect Democracy. She's also an MSNBC opinion columnist and television commentator, and publishes Lucid, a newsletter on threats to democracy. Her latest book, Strongmen, Mussolini to the Present, looks at how illiberal leaders use propaganda, corruption, violence, and machismo, and how they can be defeated. Ruth, welcome back into the back room.
Thank you. I'm delighted to be speaking with you again.
So we got a lot to chat about. I want to start by reminding folks that back in 2021, you wrote the New York Times bestselling book, Strongmen, Mussolini to the Present. For years, you've been writing and speaking about and warning about, and quite accurately, I should add, Donald Trump's threat to our democracy. We've just passed his initial 9 months. You and I spoke last in June. How would you assess where we are today versus 6 months ago with his autocratic overreach?
That's the big question, right? I mean, definitely they have sought to advance at a dizzying speed this kind of autocratic takeover, and that's one of the things that differentiates our experience from the first, if you look at the first year of people we know now as autocrats like Erdogan or in Turkey or Putin or Orban. They did not do so many things so quickly. If you add up domestic shifts in foreign policy, trade policy, it resembles more after a coup or after even like a revolution. That's so if your head is exploding, this is why. But that said, so there's huge damage that's been done. But that said, I had written a piece in my Substack Lucid in February saying that I thought that there was going to be a reckoning because the speed and the chaos and the corruption would be so great, the scope and the scale so great that eyes would open and there would be a kind of backlash that would build. And that's what we're seeing. Absolutely extraordinary, ordinary people running out and organizing against ICE, the record numbers of protesters for No Kings, the legal resistance that's succeeded hugely. And so I'm actually, I am an optimist by nature, but by my studies, I could be a pessimist, but I think that is something we should never underestimate how much resistance there is that's building in our country.
So that's really interesting. And I happen to agree with you too. And actually my nickname is Optimistic Andy. So we're aligned on that. But for the folks at home, I think it's important so that we're not talking in a vacuum. I would love for you to sort of discuss from a historical perspective what you just said. Is that typical of what you've seen and researched over the last several decades with other autocratic regimes or dictatorships, and how the regimes start to unravel because of that kind of resistance?
Well, in a way, just as the onslaught has been like a blitzkrieg, although it's to qualify, it's not a coup. We have an opposition party. We can be speaking. We have Substacks that are against the administration. So we don't have like a one-party state like the old school. And that's often now not how it works today. But normally it takes years, especially in a situation of real dictatorship, it takes years to build an opposition movement. And And the other thing we have to think about is we have a very large country, and it's very complex. And there's the whole tradition of states' rights, which has actually been something that's helped us compared to other countries. But resistance today is often decentralized. And that's like a thing of the future, because in other countries, like in Poland, you see everybody descends on Warsaw, or in Georgia, Tbilisi, everybody's there in the capital. And we had that in 2017 with the Women's March. But as we see, the brutality of ICE and the way that they're rolling out this kind of state repression is happening in our neighborhoods all over the place. Mm-hmm. So the resistance is all over the place. And so we shouldn't expect our resistance to look like other countries either. But it's happening at a kind of volume, I would say, that I wouldn't have guessed would happen so early. And so that's very promising.
You know, one of the significant changes that I believe has occurred since we last spoke in June is his overall standing and how he's been losing in Congress, the court of law, the court of public opinion, in the media, within MAGA itself. He appears to be a wounded animal who can no longer control the narrative or the news cycle. What's your thinking? Is he less of an existential threat heading into 26?
I think the wounded animal image is a good one. And so I've got two things going in the optimist and the pessimist direction. The pessimist first, I know, and I have some kind of line in my book, Strongmen, that's more elegant than wounded animal, but less effective, that when their backs are against the wall, this is when they're most dangerous. Mm-hmm. And often what they do is they either start a war, or if they're in a war already, they're kind of losing, they should get out of it, they go in deeper. So they double down on everything. And that's because often they don't have any objective feedback anymore. They have gotten themselves so surrounded by sycophants and incompetence, that whole dynamic, that they are just relying, what does Trump calls his great, beautiful brain, or his big, beautiful brain. And they make mistakes. And so one of the things that's interesting to me is the whole Venezuela thing. Americans are not in favor. So that would be his war. We're going to go in there and we're going to distract everybody. We're going to do. But it's been handled in an incompetent manner where some of his spokespeople are too open about them just wanting the oil. They're like, we're going in to help the U.S. oil companies. Well, people are in a terrible state in our country because of his policies. They don't want to hear that. So they make a lot of unforced errors. So ultimately it's a positive thing because more people wake up and realize that this person is not the infallible God who compares himself to Jesus Christ and is not really what he said he was. And then more people will open their eyes, and even if they don't come in the streets and resist, they may not vote for him anymore.
Right. Well, we're starting to see that. I think it would be a disaster for him to invade Venezuela or any other country because it goes against everything he campaigned on, goes against his promises of America first, no wars. His big brag is not only that there were no wars under me, but now I'm ending wars left and right. There's 8, maybe going to be 9. Like, his base to me would blow a gasket if, as they're continuing to pay more for groceries and health insurance, et cetera, if we're playing Rambo in Venezuela.
Yeah, and it doesn't help that all of that's coming out, including, the Wall Street Journal and media outlets that have been pro-Trump, the whole thing about Hegseth and killing innocent, people, that's not playing very well. But an interesting thing, because these people have been masters of propaganda. Trump truly is one of the most gifted propagandists in history. He got tens of millions of people to believe that he won the 2020 election. That's like that's unusual to pull off if you don't have a one-party state. But there is no good narrative about Venezuela. So, for example, when they did the missile strike into Iran to help Netanyahu, there was a narrative for it, and it was popular with evangelicals because they have their whole thing about the holy war, and and Hegseth is part of this, and Vance, for the Holy Land. So it was helping the Holy Land, the whole Zionist evangelical thing. So there was enough of a narrative there. But Venezuela, there's no narrative. And it just seems to be the oil companies and stopping drugs. But then again, too many media outlets are saying that. I mean, of course, Maduro is a gangster masquerading as a politician.
But so was Hernandez, and he got a pardon.
Exactly. So there's two. So the media, I mean, we can complain a lot about the things, the way that they soft pedal things, or they excuse people in power. But there's more of an unmasking of the hypocrisy right now.
Yeah,
I would say.
It's interesting you say that, because I've noticed that in the last several weeks, there are people on the air. They're being very critical, very publicly, frequently critical. But I think there is somewhat of a narrative. It's that whole drug thing, but it is contradicted. This inherent contradiction of going after the drug traffickers as you're pardoning cocaine Juan from Honduras. But also at the same time, if you ask them about the drug, it's the fentanyl. We got to stop the fentanyl, but there's no fentanyl in Venezuela. That comes from Mexico. It's just bonkers.
So you could say they're losing their touch. And I think that, some of the people are very, like Miller, they're very focused on the ICE repression and deporting and all of that. But that's backfiring too, as we see from the response. I don't know what the polling is among Republicans for it, but it's extraordinary that even in red states, people are coming out against this. And so they're you could say they're losing their touch. He definitely, as an individual, is down in the polls, and he's looking weak. He's more in his deficiencies, physical, cognitive, are harder to mask. And the other problem they have, Andy, and I'm very interested in this, they chose the wrong successor. Now, with Strongmen, you're not allowed to talk about successors. Nobody talks about Putin's successor. Nobody hears anything, or Erdogan. You can't, because you go to jail or worse. But all the stakeholders, the evangelicals, Project 2025, they all chose Vance. Peter Thiel, very, very important. All the tech bros. Vance is their person, and he's supposed to be the future of MAGA. But he's not. It wasn't a good choice, because he's totally unlikable.
Right.
And he doesn't even poll well with independents. He's just
MAGA
totally unlikable.
MAGA hates him. He's the elitist that he's the Ivy League's elitist that Trump rails about.
And he can't overcome that with any charisma. He has, you have a production background, Hollywood. The star quality thing does actually matter. And Trump had it. And he really did. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And Vance doesn't have it. So they have a huge problem. As Trump gets weaker, they don't have a substitute. And so now it's very interesting. Erica Kirk is cozying up to Vance physically with the very lavish hugs on stage. They could end up being a running team, for 2028. There has to be some damage control done, putting him with people who do have charisma and glamour. So that's going to be, we should all watch what they do around Vance, because he's just not, they made a mistake with him. So it's super interesting to track this.
Yeah, to me, he's just a total zero. He has no grip on the party. The MAGAs hate him. That they've sort of anointed him the heir apparent. Just it does seem kind of bizarre. But I want to ask you about Trump in particular, with all the studies you've done of other autocrats and dictators. There must be a pattern, right, to their ascension, right, when they first hit the scene until that point where they finally grab total power. Does Donald Trump's, if we want to call it an ascent into autocracy, is there any parallel between those successful autocrats or dictators and his way too soon, way too chaotic path?
There actually is, because a lot of them are like this. And I was very dismayed when I was doing the research for Strongmen, and we were in Trump 1.0, which, by the way, was so much worse. People have like an amnesia of how much bad stuff happened during that, how damaging it was. In fact, they've been able to move so swiftly because of the stuff they did last time. But yes, and one of the main principles is if a country has had, a society has had a lot of social progress, could be gender equity, women in new positions of power, racial emancipation, workers' rights, whatever it is. It's usually some combination. Once that trajectory is really off and running, that's when the strongman comes up and says, oh no, we got to turn back the clock. And in European American context, that means we got to have the white male supreme. We got to have white Christianity. And we saw that. So Trump was on target there because we'd had 8 years of Barack Obama. That was something new. We had Hillary Clinton as presidential candidate, something new. Same-sex marriage legalized. All kinds of things were going on. And so we had the backlash, and we're still living through this backlash. And they've been very successful administratively at shutting down DEI, not in the workplace as well as schools, all in society, and they forced a retreat. It's just temporary, I think, and that's why it was very sad that Kamala Harris did not win, and it was such a small margin of loss because we're really on a trajectory to be the multiracial democracy that we are known for in the world, and this is like trying to drag us back really fast into this white Christian supremacy with the strong man on top. And that's what Hegseth has done. He's gotten rid of so many female leaders and non-white leaders. That's just as an example.
Yeah. Well, I want to talk to you about him in a second, but, the scandals we're experiencing. So we see Epstein, we see the Department of Justice and the Hegseth scandals. They've been dominating the headlines. In authoritarian systems, do scandals like these typically weaken a leader or strengthen their grip by testing institutional resistance?
So the reason we're living through a good example of why autocrats engage in what's called media capture. And they do it over time normally, like Orban, he's done it over time because the ideal for the autocrat is that the scandal cannot emerge. It can't emerge at all. Nowadays, because we don't have as many one-party states, the scandal can start to emerge, and then the journalists have to already be tainted for the public as fake news. That's why what Trump did from the very beginning, like we're talking starting in 2015, started talking about fake news,
right?
Because you want to turn the public, it's like insurance for the autocrat. You turn the public against them and judges, anybody who can harm them, and you discredit them. And so if a scandal comes out, your base can't cognitively process it as such. And they're just like, oh, it's fake news. Mm-hmm. And he's done that very successfully, but with the Epstein, for example, it's fraying. The whole thing is fraying. And that's where we go back to the media some media being more willing. I mean, the Washington Post may be owned by Bezos now, and there's many things it won't touch, but it is touching many things as well. It's out there saying things about different scandals. Mm-hmm. So he hasn't been able to capture the media. And so in that case, the scandal can really hurt.
It does seem like the amount of controversies that embroil this White House, and him in particular, are swallowing him up, which is the first time like I said, he's not been able to control the narrative or the news cycle. I don't know if that's temporary or if that's just the beginning of his ultimate unraveling, but it is interesting to watch.
It's significant. And I will just put everybody's attention on something because I try and listen very carefully right now. Jamie Dimon said that he was asked why his company was not going to participate and contribute to Trump's ballroom. And Trump has gotten all these big banks and companies to fund his ballroom. And Jamie Dimon said, that, I'm paraphrasing, that a future DOJ might not look well on that.
Right.
What he's saying is there's going to be, in his estimation, there's a chance that these people will all be gone, democracy will be restored, and the future DOJ would go after people who had enabled Trump. So that's a big statement. He did it in a very subtle way, but it's a big statement. And if more people of the elites, the people who make things happen, if they turn like that, then it's going to be much harder for MAGA.
Yeah, I happen to agree with him. I don't understand why these people just seem to act with reckless abandon. Maybe they do think they're going to be in power forever, or they think he's going to pardon them or whatever, but they seem to think they're never going to be held accountable. And what Jamie Dimon said, I think, is 100% true. So with regard to the big news about Hegseth and the double tap strike, there's already scapegoating that's going on and a cover-up taking shape. What happens in a democracy typically when military accountability begins to weaken like this?
Well, people have pointed out that it wouldn't have gotten this far because there are checks and balances within the military before such a thing would happen, and during the Obama, we do have to say, during the Obama administration, there were lots of drone strikes. Mm-hmm. In Pakistan, Afghanistan, places that killed civilians. There are famous cases where it was a whole family that had a wedding and there was a drone strike. So things happened, but there was a process of investigation that here they're trying to do everything. As you said, they believe that they have immunity, and what can happen to people in a situation where they've been led to feel they can be lawless, that they'll be rewarded by the leader for being lawless, is that they get arrogant. And when they've taken away, like the Judge Advocates General, mm-hmm. the JAGs, mm-hmm. they've taken away all oversight.
Or the JAG-offs, as Hegseth calls them.
Yes, and he has scorn for them, which is a sign that he's not in democracy anymore. Mm-hmm. When those oversight mechanisms are taken away, and there's a culture of having your hands untied, that's what Hegseth told everybody at Quantico, that the old rules of engagement are gone, and your hands are now untied, and everybody knows what that means. Mm-hmm. It means lawlessness. And so it's whatever happens with this, it's good to point out, I like to do the big picture things. As we've had an undoing of the rule of law at home, there's been a parallel, like in governance in general, that there's been a parallel process inside the military where, again, people are being told they're unleashed. That's what Miller told law enforcement. And there's also been an undoing of international law. So that it's like rogue, lawless behavior across the spectrum. And that's why President Trump invited to American soil two people who are wanted by the International Criminal Court for war crimes, Netanyahu and Putin, to show scorn. And so a culture comes up of lawlessness and lack of morals that ends up in scandals like this, atrocities like this.
Well, just to divert for a second, you mentioned Netanyahu. I read something yesterday that he said he's coming to New York City, and Mamdani had previously said he would arrest him. I mean, is this like a real plausible scenario where the Israeli prime minister comes to New York City and gets arrested?
I don't know when he's coming. If he's coming now, then Mamdani's not in power yet. But
let's assume he comes in January when Mamdani is the mayor.
I can't speculate. I mean, America doesn't recognize the International Criminal Court.
Right.
So those particular charges have no weight in theory here.
Right.
Which is, but it's useful to remind people that many, many other countries in the world do respect and abide by the International Criminal Court. So one of the times Netanyahu came to the United States, he had to have a very circuitous flight path. So he didn't go over many European countries because if in the event something happened to his plane, and he had to land, or he got ill, or someone got ill, and he had to land, he would be arrested in those countries. So he went all over the place to avoid it, to come to the haven for war criminals of the United States. And that's also why bringing Putin to Alaska was a bold move, one could say. And that's done on purpose, because the whole point of this administration is to totally devastate the rule of law, everywhere, every form, and enable lawlessness, plunder of the environment, plunder of the economy, plunder of female bodies. It's all connected.
So yesterday, Admiral Frank Bradley and the chairman of Joint Chiefs, Dan Kane, came to Congress and pretty much just towed the party line. You know, this was self-defense, this double tap bombing and attack. Does that worry you when these two guys go into Congress and from what we can see, just lie like that?
Yeah, and it's part of making what they've had a project for some time of making the U.S. military into an authoritarian entity, and there are many reasons for that. One is to do with geopolitics. That the biggest deterrent to autocrats in the world, including Xi Jinping, Putin, was the U.S. military. It was the most powerful military in the world. It had a totally global reach. So you have to destroy that military, or not destroy it, but repurpose it into something different so that the autocrats can run free. And so that's why they've formally made the statement, I think, that they're going to focus on the Americas. And about a month ago, or even since 6 weeks ago, I published a piece in Lucid saying this would happen, because it has to happen so Xi can have Asia, go in Taiwan, Putin can have Europe and Eurasia, and the America of old that would have perhaps engaged to prevent that is no longer. And so the military, so that's the geopolitical thing, but the military has to be retooled to have people who, we go back to the lawlessness, who don't mind lying, who are corrupt, who don't mind violence, because they have a different view of the military that's not a democratic view.
What do you think is ultimately Trump's end goal? I mean, we all know he lacks any real core philosophy. It's not like he sits and studies foreign policy strategy and makes weighted, calculated decisions. Certainly not what's in the best interest of this country. It seems like it's just all about money, making money wherever he can, enriching himself, enriching his family, his kids, his friends. And that at the same time, you may think that, it then also makes you think like, well, he's not really out to destroy democracy. He's just being Trump. He's being the same greedy, corrupt Trump he always was. He's just, instead of the corner office at Trump Org, he's in the Oval Office in the White House, but he's operating basically the same. And the conflict that we see is that he's never had to deal with a Congress, never had to deal with courts this way. Do you get a sense that that's what we're dealing with? Just a corrupt guy who just, it's all about the grift?
No, it's all about the grift, for sure. That part I agree with. In fact, the purpose, it's hard for people who had lived in a democracy their whole lives to get this, that the purpose of governance for autocrats has nothing to do with what we normally think about in a democracy. It's not, they don't care about governing, and they also certainly don't care about public welfare. The purpose of holding office is to enrich yourself privately. So that holding, like Putin's done this, he has a kleptocracy. All of state institutions have been repurposed to enrich him and the oligarchs and the cronies. And that's a lot, and I have a whole corruption chapter in Strongmen, so you can read that and see how it works. And it's a system. But I also think that Trump wants to destroy democracy. That's part of the mandate, is to, he admires autocrats. He admires that kind of power, and that's what he wants for himself. And that means he has to destroy democracy to get that.
Yeah, I'm sort of on the fence. Like, part of me agrees with you, because in order to fully enrich himself, he kind of has to destroy democracy in order to achieve his financial goals. But Ruth, always fascinating to talk with you. Thanks for coming on, and I look forward to the next time.
Me too. Thank you.
All righty. Take care. This episode was produced and edited by me, Andy Ostroy. It was co-produced by Maddie Rosenberg and Jen Hammoud for Radio Free Rhinecliff, with additional editing by Maddie Rosenberg, music by Andrew Hollander, and graphic design by Cricket Langell. And with a special thanks to our sponsor, The Epicurean. Again, thanks for listening. Please rate and review wherever you get your podcasts, and subscribe to the Backroom with Andy Ostroy YouTube channel, where you can watch full videos of our interviews. See you next time.